In this session, we are going to learn about basics of subsystems and how we can manage very different blocks or many different blocks in our Simulink model and create some subsystems and write down some scripts, or actually try to link the scripts to the models, right? So let's try and learn about what are the subsystems, right? So before we begin, let me show you a very fundamental thing to be noted down is the directory path, right? So if some of your colleague or if some other person has given you any of the file, right, and you try to open that file, I think one of the way to open this file is to browse through the directory path. So the earlier files I have saved into the new folder, and whatever I'm going to see here is my gear transmission file, right? So here I have a gear transmission file, and probably I have 1, 2, 3, 4 main blocks, right? And these are Simscape mechanical blocks, and I actually want to just understand all these blocks as one system or as a black box and try to play with the input and output. So we want to have one input, one output, and try to see what is happening inside. So in order to compress our complex diagram, which is likely going to be the case where you have more than 10 number of blocks, probably you can zoom it out and use the other space. Or if your diagram is not going to look it properly, which is this case, let's say I have something where this connection is not proper, or it may not be okay to deal with the diagram, right? Or if the diagram is very complex, it's not possible to deal with it, right, with some good accuracy. So what we are going to do, we are going to create all these blocks which are included here, and let me create a subsystem, right? So what we are going to do here is now create a subsystem of all these blocks. So how do we create it? So when we just select all the blocks and click on the 3 dots which are coming up, there will be an option of create a subsystem, right? So this is basic first option, create a subsystem, right? Let me do it again for you, and I just don't want to include the scope, and I just don't want to include the slider gain, so I'm just shifting them here so that they are not selected, and rest of the things, all things I want to include in a subsystem. So I think I have all the models, and if I create a subsystem, look at what has happened. So now all the blocks have gone into a subsystem, and we have number of inputs and outputs, right? So if we double click on this, we'll get to know what is inside the subsystem. Now if you want to go back, you have to just click over to the previous block, which is gear transmission, which is name of the file we have given. So now I'm back to the main model. Now in the main model we have just one input and output, and therefore this can be like again simplified to a great extent. And if we have a subsystem like this, and if you have similar inputs going to other systems as well, where you can have another group of subsystem, let's say randomly, let me take all these 3 blocks which may not be actually relevant, we just commented them out, but create another subsystem, right? So we are creating another subsystem. What you have observed, when we create a subsystem, it is going to assign by default the output and input ports, and all the connections are going to remain same. So this is how you can create a subsystem. And if you want to just go back, you can press the Ctrl Z and see how the things were previously. So now we are again back to the same part, and I can press again Ctrl Y and see what we did, right? So the important keywords or important keyboard shortcuts are Control Y and Control Z, same as how you play with your Word file or the Microsoft Office. So whatever you have done, you can undo and redo easily. So this is the subsystem which we have created, and now there are various types of the subsystem. So we can actually make this enable or disable, or we can create a subsystem for selection, or we can convert this to a reference subsystem or a variant subsystem as well. Now, what is a reference subsystem and a variant subsystem? You can learn this in detail from the help, but effectively the variant subsystem is nothing but you create a gear system where you have a gear ratio and the wheel ratio like this. Now you duplicate the system and you have some other gear ratio with some other wheel radius, and that is your subsystem too. Now you just want to run a variant of a subsystem where the gear ratio and the wheel radius or wheel diameters in meter are something else. So here you can have another subsystem created, and you can disable this and enable the other one and easily switch between different types of subsystems. So I hope the subsystem part is clear to you. And now in order to learn more, let's actually understand about the complex mechanical engineering systems. So whatever we have tried to create it here is a gear and a wheel axle system, which is engine transmission system. And let's understand actually how the engine related systems can be modeled. So now I'm going to open up the MATLAB documentation, and in the documentation toolbar I'm going to search engine. So the moment I search engine, there will be a drop down popping up like this, and we can have many different suggestions. So we have basic search with an engine, and we can actually make it very generic with reference to, let's say, some Simulink blocks of engine. So here we are getting many different stuff which is related to engine, because engine is a very common word which will appear in the search result. So we can type engine Simulink. So now with the Simulink, we have something related to mapped SI engine, mapped CI engine, and there are other related things as well. So here what we are able to see is many different types of engine related results. So here let me show you a simple SI core engine, and this is a high level model of an engine from powertrain block set. So powertrain block set is actually quite high level block set which is for automotive purpose. So here you can see what are the inputs and what are the outputs and what are the efficiency related equations, what is the air fuel ratio, what happens to the exhaust, how the power is calculated, and what kind of inputs are there and what kind of outputs are available. So here you can get all the information related to the engine. Now before we actually go with the powertrain block set related engine, let's understand a very simple engine block, or let's search in our model itself an engine block. So I'm going to here search an engine, and it's a generic engine, right? So generic engine is a very fundamental block which we are going to get, right? So let me search something related to generic engine in the help, and a generic engine is going to be a most simple block of an engine. So here you have the engine speed, throttle, power and the torque, and engine power demand and its curve, and whatever are the inputs and outputs, and how these values are created, right? And in the help file you can get all the idea about the generic engine. So let's search again with this generic engine and understand about the search results. So what I'm trying to get is, let's say, let's find some engine related model. So let's find engine model. We actually are looking for the examples, so we can actually open and close the filter block from here. So let me use this filter and understand about some examples, and let me keep it like generic engine. So here is the automatic transmission controller, and if we open up this model, this is going to be a quite complex model. Let's try to run this model and understand what is happening inside an engine block. So the purpose of showing you this example is to actually understand how the larger system or how complex models can be built. So here what you see is the Manuverse GUI, right? So this is again a subsystem. This is engine is a subsystem. The gear shift logic is also a subsystem. The transmission system we just tried to create one is another subsystem, and the vehicle model. So here what you have is a vehicle model, and what you can see is all those parameters of a vehicle model. Now if we want to understand what is inside this, what we can do is click on this arrow which is appearing over here. So if you click on this arrow, it will show like look inside the mask. So you can see look inside the mask, and what is inside the mask? See, this is a vehicle model which is created by implementing the equations. So what you see here is the addition, the multiplication, some gain, and there is some another block which is linear speed conversion. So if I go back again, I can go back to the main file, like browse the depth of the model from this part, and if I click over here vehicle, or if I click over here, I will be again in the main block, right? So this is about the vehicle subsystem, and let's go into the engine subsystem, and what you see here is the engine torque. So what is this engine torque? So basically an engine is actually implemented as a lookup table. So what is a lookup table? A lookup table is nothing but the data which are given as the characteristics. So here we do not have any engine model, but you will be able to understand how subsystem creation will help reduce the complexity of your model, right? So here if you want to understand what are the maneuvers, right? So here is a throttle applied like this, and the brake applied like this. So this is again a signal builder block. You can apply multiple signals as well, right? So this is a signal builder block, and probably how it looks different, right? Probably you can change the name like this, and you can change how it appears as well from like this, and instead of signal 1 and signal 2 you can use the throttle and brake signals as well. So this is one example of what subsystem is, and in fact you can study about the how MATLAB has created all these models by looking into a subsystem. So let me show you how. So I'm again going to the model which we created, and I'm interested to understand what is inside this generic engine, right? Or which are the other blocks which are implemented inside the generic engine. So now I want to see inside, so I can right click over here and actually press look under mask, so which is the control U. So what you see here is a mask, and you can look under the mask, and if I select this object and press the control U, you will be able to see the block properties from inside. So this is a Simulink block, and you will not be able to see because it's a Simscape language, and if the model is built with a very fundamental Simulink blocks, you will be able to see what is inside the block. So let's take some other block and let's try to understand how it is created. So let's try to have a vehicle body. So let's understand what is a vehicle body. So vehicle body is another block. Let me show you properly. So this is a vehicle body block, and if we again press Ctrl U, because it's a Simscape block, we'll not be able to go inside and see its definition or see its model, right? So let me select some other block which is other than the Simscape. So let's have some gear. So here we have a gearbox which is a foundation library, mechanical, and it is again a Simscape model because it's a green color. So let me search out some other block and let's find out how these blocks are created by the MATLAB. Let's understand how MATLAB has built subsystems and how the larger blocks are created from the smaller blocks. So I'm going to use let's say we go to the aerospace block set, and in the aerospace block set let's select the aerodynamics. So in the aerodynamics we have something called as aerodynamic forces and moments. Now this is going to be the fundamental Simulink block, and let me add this block to our model. So we can click on this and Control I will add to our block. Now here, when I have added this aerodynamic forces and moments, I can actually configure this block by what are the input axis, force axis, moment axis, and what are the criteria, right? Now if I want to understand how this block is created and how this block basically works, so what I can do is right click on this and check out this mask option. So if I right click and check out this mask option, and we have something called look under the mask, and if we do this we will be able to understand what is under this block. So if I press Ctrl U, now we are at a next level of model. So this is how the MATLAB has created the aerodynamic forces and moments block. Now basically these are all MATLAB fundamental blocks, and if you double click on this you will be able to see what are the other systems inside. So here you will be able to understand what are the other parts. Let's say here is a cross product used, here is a moment transfer, and these are the inputs which are actually used for the blocks. So if we again come back to our main system, here we have this block, and basically the subsystem hierarchy is going to help us to model all related blocks. But remember, the Simscape is such a language which is different than a Simulink, and you will not be able to look under the mask. Sometimes there may be some blocks which are, let's say like this, which will allow you to see the source code. So here you can click on the source code and it will open up. So this is how the MATLAB hierarchy works out for subsystem and system level. Now let me delete this block and actually understand how we can do the experiments now, right? So we have something available over here as the gear transmission block, and let me delete this subsystem as well. So now my model is clear, and we have a subsystem, and we can rename the subsystem as let's say gear and wheel along with the axle. So here we have the name gear and wheel given to this subsystem, and we can probably change this names as well, and we can assign some image to the subsystem as well. So instead of the block which is displayed like this, we can actually assign some image, and for that you can refer the help.